Hello St Peters, today I'm going to read you Hercules the Tortoise by Terry Pratchett. Hercules the Tortoise. It was the end of March, in fact about 1/4 when the smell of spring broke into the shed. It drifted across the floor, found its way under a pile of old packing cases and stopped at a large wooden box. The box smelled of autumn straw, and deep in the heart of it something began to stir. Or rather, someone. Hercules awoke from dreams of lettuce fields under a midsummer sun. Slowly his wrinkled head poked out from his shell. He sniffed and yawned and tried to wiggle deeper into the straw, but it was no use. Spring again, he thought, without a doubt, and he tried to get his head round so that he could see his shell, because tortoises have rings on their shells and grow one for every year. Yes, there it was, the new ring, and Hercules felt ready to face the outside world. He didn't have to wait long before the lid of the box was opened and a large pair of hands lifted him out and put him in the garden. Hercules' garden was wide and consisted mostly of lawns, on which a few tasty dandelion leaves were always to be found. There were roses and lupins in the flower bed, a good feed if he was ever allowed to get to them, and at the far end of the garden was the winter shed and the compost heap. What lay beyond it, he did not know. On sunny days, when the wind was in the south, he would explore that way, but was always found, and someone always brought him back. Hercules lay on the lawn and stretched his legs. The hands put a small heap of lettuce leaves in front of him, and he chewed them thoughtfully. The land beyond the shed had occupied his dreams during the long winter sleep. I wonder what lies beyond, he mused, thinking, as he often did, in capital letters. There might be lettuce, or even buttercups. But secretly he knew that it was not buttercups he was after. He really wanted to travel beyond the shed to see what lay on the other side. He didn't think of it as escaping the garden, but the people did, and when they found him gone from the lawn, they always took him back. They looked high and low in all his usual sleeping places, in his wooden house in the rockery, and Hercules was nowhere to be seen. In fact, he was behind the shed, scratching away at the earth with his powerful forefeet, until he was able to scrape under the wire netting fence. The wind was in the south, and Hercules felt the wanderlust of all tortoises in his blood. He swished through the long grass, and soon the garden was empty. Well, that's done it, said Hercules to himself, as he plodded on through the long grass beyond the garden. I'm out in the world. All right, said someone. Don't walk all over me, you great tank. What sort of snail are you anyway? Hercules looked down. There, sitting on a dock leaf, was a large yellow snail. I'm extremely sorry, he mumbled. I'm a tortoise. I do apologise. I'm Pod, said the snail. That's a nice house you've got on your back there. Very nice. I like it. Yes, I really think I do. I haven't seen you before. I'm from the garden, said Hercules, but I've come to explore. Oh, well, I don't get around much. I've only got one leg, you see, said Pod. Just the one, I really have, and a house to carry. It's rather sad. Oh dear. If you climb up on my back, I'll give you a lift, said Hercules. And Pod slid off the leaf and took up position on top of his shell. Why do you use so many capital letters, he asked as they moved on. All tortoises do, said Hercules. Traditional, you know. As he swished through the grass, Pod told him about the world. There was the garden and the field, and somewhere in the field there was a pond, and that was the end of it. There's no more. Leastways, not that I've heard, he said. And there are frogs in the pond and snakes in the grass, he went on, adding with a shiver, particularly one nasty adder. He brightened up. But also bees in the pollen and sometimes pigs in the clover. Clover made Hercules feel hungry, and they stopped by a large clump of it for a meal. It was nearly midday. If you want to know a bit more about the world, you ought to go and see old Mother Greengrown, said Pod, with his mouth full. She lives by the pond, in the middle of the field. She's very old, knows everything worth knowing anyway. How far away is the pond? Asked Hercules. Pod looked blank. Oh, some way away, he said. Distances don't mean much to me, I'm afraid. Bees whizzed by like tiny aeroplanes as Hercules trundled on, in search of the pond and old Mother Greengrown. But a little way behind them stood a long, sleek shape, and it slid through the grass with hardly a sound. Its back was zigzagged with yellow and black, and its cruel eyes were fastened hungrily on the retreating tortoise. It was the adder. Hercules and Pod reached the pond just as the sun was setting. They stood on the bank and peered down into the deep water. A passing moorhen saw them and hastily paddled off. "I have some relatives here," said Pod conversationally. "Water snails, you know." "Does old Mother Greengrown live here?" asked Hercules. "Round the other side," said Pod. "You'll always find old Mother Greengrown there. She never goes far these days." What sort of thing is old Mother Greengrown?" "I don't wish to be rude, but I need to recognise her," said Hercules, as he made his way round the pond with Pod sitting on his back. Pod looked shocked. "You'll see." They came to a pile of stones and dead leaves, where a few stunted thorn bushes grew by the pond. Just then there was a hiss behind them. Pod turned and saw an adder waiting to strike. It had followed them across the field. "Help!" shouted Pod, and disappeared into his shell. "Eh?" said Hercules. And then he saw the snake. There was a hiss, and he too disappeared into his shell with a snap. "It's going to eat old Mother Greengrown," moaned Pod, poking his eyes out from under his shell. "That horrid snake hates her." And the long black and yellow body started to slither towards the pile of stones. With courage he never knew he had, Hercules poked out his head from his shell and bit the adder. He held on, and when a tortoise bites, it never lets go. Frantically, the snake reared up and lashed out with its tail, but Hercules only gripped tighter as Pod clung to his back and trembled. At last, the snake lay still, and Hercules unfastened his aching jaws. Then he realised he was being watched. Small animal heads were peering out from behind every stone and bush, and many eyes twinkled in the dusk. A larger shadow detached itself from the rocks. It was old Mother Greengrown, the toad. "What is this?" she asked, staring at Hercules. He's a tortoise, madam," said Pod. "A very brave one," said the toad. "But why is he here?" "I wanted to see what the world was like," said Hercules. "It's no place for tortoises," said old Mother Greengrown. "But you killed the adder, so you can stay if you wish. It's a big place, bigger than a garden, and a lot happens, and there might be other adders." Hercules looked down at the dead adder. "I'd like to stay," he said quietly, "if there's a place, but first I want to explore the world." And that's how the tortoise left the garden and became an explorer. There was a whole field to discover. With Pod on his back, he travelled from edge to edge. He even went right around the pond. It was a glorious adventure, there and back again. And when his travels were over, he settled down to live in the field, digging himself a hole to sleep in during the winter, and going again on his travels in the summer. But he never had to fight another adder, for all the adders knew of Hercules, the slayer of adders, and they slithered away when they saw him coming, which was good news for Pod too. I hope you enjoyed that one, St. Peters.